I think it was from Elaine, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Oh, I'm here. I don't know if I'm echoing.
You're not
Hear me?
echoing now.
Yeah.
Then I'll start off with a roll call of the commission. Please verbally indicate you're present when your name is called. Commissioner Kelly,
Present.
Commissioner Parkins,
Present.
Commissioner Lascos,
Present.
Commissioner Motto,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Onofrio,
Present.
alternate Commissioner Usel,
Present.
myself, Commissioner Harger, Mr. Rossetti, our administrator,
Present.
Mr. O'Neill, our assistant administrator and CEO.
He may be attending later.
Okay, so he's not here right now. And Mr. Nappi, you're not present yet?
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Panico, our consultant.
Present.
Ms. Renassos, our recording secretary.
Present.
And Ms. Charbonneau, our stenographer.
Present.
Okay, Commissioner Tiki indicated to me about a half hour ago, he had a little bit of a conflict and would try to, if he can, he will join us later on, but he wouldn't be able here for the start of the meeting. Just a couple points for continuing with today's agenda. Mr. Rossetti will act as the Zoom meeting host, while commissioners will be able to make comments throughout the meeting. The chair asks that you please identify yourself and wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking to make sure we're not all speaking over each other and to make sure our recording secretary and our stenographer are clear as to who is speaking. This evening, we have two public hearings, and the first is continuation of the public hearing for application 20-22 Riverview Park Royal, Dominic Thomas for Canal Properties LLC at 113 to 123 Canal Street, Assessor's Map 130, lots 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, petitioning for a special exception on a 2.57 acres in the riverfront RFD zone. This proposal is for a 5-story mixed-use building with 11,000 square feet of retail commercial space on the first floor and 92 studio, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom apartments with on-site parking. Just a little recap of where we have been with this particular application. It was accepted for review on December 8th, 2020. It was withdrawn on January 27th, 2021. It was resubmitted and accepted for review on June 8th, 2021. A public hearing opened on July 21, 2021, where the commission heard from Mr. Getz. The commission voted to continue the public hearing. Continuation of the public hearing was on the August 17th and September 22nd agendas. Excuse me, and continued by the commission both times. At the October 27th meeting, the commission was informed that the Inland Wetlands Commission approved the applicant's project at its meeting on October 21st. The commission was also informed that the city's engineer was waiting for a structural engineering report for the revised garage elevation, which had been designed to avoid a water diversion, which does not require a permit, according to Attorney Thomas. And the commission continued the public hearing. At the November 17th, 2021 meeting, the commission was informed that the city engineer was finishing his project report and will be reviewing the applicant's proposed structural report to cap the open area of the property, which is the canal. Attorney Thomas informed the commission that the project would be exempt from DEEP's water diversion permit requirement. And due to the structural report just being filed, Attorney Thomas requested the application be tabled, and the commission voted to do so. So that brings us up to this evening. Attorney Thomas, do you have any further information for the commission?
Madam Chair, just before we start, I just want to make sure that I'm seated at the beginning.
Yeah, I called you. Oh, I'm sorry. I put you in attendance, and thank you for that. Commissioner Usal, you will be seated for Commissioner Tiki.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Attorney Thomas, do you have any further information for the commission?
Yes, I do. Attorney Dominic Thomas, Conan Thomas, 315 Main Street, Derby, Connecticut, representing the applicant. The structural engineer report was done. It was extremely comprehensive and really addressed construction issues beyond just the issues that were presented. I've had a couple of conversations with the city engineer, including one this morning, addressing the issues. My client's response after reviewing it was that the structural engineer report had gone into things that are required of my client once there is an approval and he goes for construction drawings. At that time, and the city now has a report, but at that time, the client, my client's required to have his entire construction documents reviewed by a independent engineering firm, not his own, not connected to the project. And that was confirmed by Rimas Balsas today, your city engineer, that is the procedure that would be followed when the plans are presented for a building of this size to your building department. So there would be input. So we believe that, again, the issue here, just as it is when you have issues concerning fire code issues, that any approval would be subject to is always subject to the approval of the building department and subject to the approval of the fire marshal once you get to the next level of construction plans. There was also some comments made about the floodplain and everything. So I'm not sure if those are still of concerns, but I can address the issues. I did a little research and asked a few questions. And if you notice, I think at that point, Mr. Geddes and myself pointed out that in the floodplain issues that I've been involved in, you can certainly have parking. You can certainly have non-occupancy below the floodplain. So here's some of the research I came up with. The flood elevation at the garage level is 15 feet. For comparison's sake, the flood elevation, the elevation at the garage level, which is below the flood line. And the garage elevation, for example, at 223 Canal is at 18 feet. And that project, which I was not involved in, was reviewed by DEEP, CHAFA, the state, and DOH because of its funding for it, and it's all approved. Now, in that, you cannot have any electrical things without the automatic shutoffs. For instance, it was pointed out that the elevators go down to that level, and they do, and the elevators have a system similar to the systems that are even in the houses that are built in the floodplain where you have the garage or a basement below the floodplain, in that if there is any detection of water, immediately the elevator goes up to a floor above the floodplain. So these are building permit issues, building construction issues. So I think that I've answered, the questions. I think that if the commission, again, this is a piece of property, a city of Shelton property that was a brownfield that was reclaimed in this zone. As you are aware, the client and had to deal with Burying Ground Brook. I think the chairman mentioned canal, but there is a canal somewhere along there, but this is not a canal. This is covering Burying Ground Brook, which has created the issue. That's with the span. The client still has to go forward with that. In addition to that, as part of this proposal, as you are aware, the client has to extend the Riverwalk on property off-site. So our parking, due to the changes that were made with the Burying Ground Brook plan, the parking is actually expanded on the site. So we have a very good amount of parking as was shown in the revised plans that were submitted. And with that, I'm prepared to answer any questions that I can. I'm playing engineer, architect, everything tonight because I have no one else with me. So I'm prepared to answer any questions. And I think hopefully the public hearing can be closed and at a future meeting, this project approved.
Okay, Attorney Thomas, on the A2, A3, and really those two sheets. On the left side, the rectangular area then identified as culvert is not the canal?
Does Alex want a screen share, or I have the last, you're talking about the last revised set of plans?
Yeah, the ones I have say July 1st, 2020, and that's,
Well,
well,
there's
I noted as
actually plans that there were plans that were submitted. Alex, do you want me to try to screen share?
If you can, I was pulling him up, but my mouse is spinning. I got the spinning wheel of death, so go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah, I have a notation on these that these match the latest as of August 13th, 2021. So,
okay, let me see what I can
sure.
pull up here. Can anybody see the plans that I just pulled up?
Now we
No.
see your list of files so
Just-
far.
Just a schedule.
Hold on, all right, let me try it again.
There you go.
Okay,
Okay, so
all right,
that's
so
A4.
these are the revised, this is A4, A3.
Yeah, what's
and-
on
The date.
A2 or A3?
Okay, in
There you
A3, this is the, where it says culvert.
Yeah,
That's the culvert for the brook. It's not a canal.
is,
That's the culvert for the brook.
right, but is that the piece that the engineer and others have referred to as what has to be capped?
I can't tell you exactly. I think the issue of the capping, hold on. The issue of the capping is in a location that's closer to the street as it comes out, but you can see here, it says channel right here.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's in that area. It's, where is the channel, there's an open channel, and that's what's being capped.
Right,
I don't know how far from under the road it comes out. But again, that is all must be addressed clearly by the, when the construction plans are submitted for the building permit.
Obviously, that has to be covered because there's pavement there.
Right, exactly, yeah.
yeah, I understand. I just wanted to make sure we
Yeah.
were on the same page as
Yeah.
to what that represented and if that is the portion that is in the report that talked about being capped. It's hard,
Yes.
if you were to go down to the riverwalk, it's hard to see because it's full of brush and,
Right, yeah,
You know.
the entire portion of Bearing Ground Brook is going to be capped. None of it's going to be exposed. There's
okay,
nothing that's going to be exposed. There is, as you get down closer to the Riverwalk, or where the Riverwalk is going to go, then there's an existing culvert down there,
mhm.
down that end. That was all looked at by wetlands.
And it's not this portion that you had indicated would not need a, it would be exempt from the water diversion permit, or is that the
Okay,
portion of the,
this is the area,
garage?
yes, this is Bearing Ground Brook. The way the procedure was going to the way that the capping was going to take place, it would then allow it to be exempt under the water diversion regulations, as opposed, as if you remember, I gave you the example, as opposed to the Center Street Quorum project, in which case, in order to put that what was going to be put in there, the Bearing Ground Brook was actually going to be redirected during construction. In other words, diverted. There would be a diversion.
Mhm.
Here, there was going to be no diversion.
Okay, repeat that first part again about the diversion.
There are,
Basically, Jenny, what
diversion-
he's saying is it stays in the present location.
it stays in the present channel even during construction, okay? Now,
Okay,
you have to meet certain standards. So in my presentation to the Wetlands Commission, I presented them with the statute, and I presented a copy to you of the report that I did. And you have to comply with the certain requirements. So I took those requirements before the Wetlands Commission, before the wetlands hearing, and presented them to your city engineer, who, from his perspective, said, well, you seem to comply from the construction point of view, that you're not diverting the water, and the steps you're taking are just over the water. But for the best way to understand it is to understand why Quorum and Center, why that project needed a diversion, because in that case, the only way to do it was, in fact, to because what was requested by the city engineer there with the archway was to take the replace it entirely with an open bottom culvert. In order to accomplish that, Burying Ground Brook, it was a very complex plan, and Burying Ground Brook had to be diverted into a large pipe taken around its current location while the construction was done. That created the diversion.
All right, what sheet do you have up? Is it A2 or 3? I think it's A2.
Hold on, I think it is. No, I have A4 up, hold on.
All right,
A4, well, let me just. A3, A2, A13.
okay. Is A2 the very lowest garage level?
No,
So
no,
is,
A2 is the
A2
first
is-
floor plan.
Level.
all right, So it's gotta
okay,
be
the first floor
A4 then.
plan, street level site plan,
so it's
and
A4.
A4 is the basement garage floor plan.
All right, that's the one that's below grade.
Yes,
Okay. So somebody parking a car there, they're below the level of the river?
No,
I don't
No.
think so.
below the
No.
flood level.
Below the
They're
flood
below the
level.
flood line, they're not below the level of the river, no.
Okay,
The flood
They're at
level.
level,
is
I think it says it,
25, and the
they're at
garage is about 16.
finished garage elevation is 16.0.
okay, was there a disagreement with that in the engineering, saying it looked more like 20 or 21?
I think,
Talk
Attorney
about-
Thomas, so I think it was that referring to the 100-year flood level?
I think it was, yes.
Mhm.
And then it was 14 feet versus 16 feet in the report?
There
Oh,
was, right, right. Again, in the research that I did, and Mr. Getz couldn't be in attendance tonight, in the research that I did, he was doing a comparison for me at 223 Canal down the other end, in which the state, since the state was funding that project, required the standards to meet the 500-year flood level, not the 100-year flood level.
Mhm.
And so, in fact, down there, they had to raise some of the stuff farther up. Down here, remember, you can be below the flood level, but you can't have any living space.
Right.
You can't have any living space. Any equipment, you're not supposed to have any electrical equipment or mechanical equipment, but anything you do have, there are procedures to have it immediately separate on a separate loop or whatever you want to call it, and shut off. So I think one of the commission members asked about the elevator. I asked that question. The response I got is the elevators that are installed in this situation have a trigger, some sort of a trigger that when, similar to the case that I was involved in, it was a litigation case down along Point Beach, which by the way got flooded during the storm over the weekend, I noticed. But down at Point Beach, I was involved in a construction case where I was introduced to these things in the basement below the VE 15 flood level, where the minute water hit them, the entire electrical system that was in the basement shut down, and it was on its own separate loop. In this case, if there's any water that approaches the elevator, that the elevator senses, the elevator then immediately goes up to a floor above the flood elevation.
It goes up to a floor above the elevation, but does it continue to operate further high to upper floors? It just,
That's over my pay grade.
okay.
I couldn't tell you that.
All right, yeah, I was just wondering,
Yeah.
puts a lock into it going down into the water, but
Yeah,
can
right.
continue going up.
Right.
Does the applicant, do you know, plan to make the lower garage watertight at all? Because it.
I would assume so, but
Well, you
honestly, I
can't.
would assume construction methods
because-
would require it.
The driveways that come to that lower level garage come in at that level, 15, 15.5, 16.
Mhm.
So
Mr.
you can't
Panico,
unless you make those doors waterproof.
Right.
Okay, but Mr. Panico, at the beginning, were you saying he can or he cannot?
Unless there's something different that I don't see, I don't believe he can. No, he
Okay.
cannot.
He
No,
cannot.
because it's,
At least not as shown.
All right. Yeah, because,
If you mean water by watertight, if you mean to prevent any water from getting in, of course, water can get down the driveways.
yeah.
We'll be able to get down the driveway.
Water can come in on the Riverwalk side.
mhm,
exactly.
mhm. Okay, yeah, I mean, that would be where the drainage would come from the river to go that way. So, I'll open it up for any other commissioner to comment, but, did we come to the correct parking count? Is there still an issue with how many parking spaces are being provided and what's required?
We're actually exceeding the parking requirement.
Now, don't be too quick, Dominic.
I'm looking at
You're exceeding it
187.
based on- You're exceeding it based on the standards that the applicant chose to use.
No, it's
Yes.
parking provided 205 spaces. Okay, so with the revised plan, this is on the revised plan, you'll see up the top here, parking provided 205 spaces. There are 92 units. So at 2, which is, as I've said before, an absolutely ridiculous requirement, but at 2 per apartment, that is, if my math serves me, 184. So there are 21 spaces extra. You have in your regulations, you have a requirement that they don't need to provide on-site parking for the retail that is there because it's in the downtown area. And you do have, again,
Have an agreement with the city on those spaces if you don't provide them, Tom.
I don't know if that applies to the, I don't have honestly, I didn't bring the regulation with me. I can pull it up on the computer, but I thought for retail, I mean, the retail spaces, you're right across from the park. I don't think you have to have an agreement for retail. I mean, none of the retail establishments in downtown have off-site parking.
Mr. Thomas, can you move the screen back to the left to look at those statistics again? Thank you.
There is an option that allows the commission to give 50% credit for the non-residential. 50% of the residential parking, up to 50% of the residential parking can be credited towards the non-residential parking. So,
Well, we have on-site 21 extra spaces for, I mean, no retail in downtown. I mean, I understand that asphalt plant manufacturers, maybe need financial assistance, but there's no need to have that much excess parking. But there's 11,500 square feet of retail proposed, and we have 21 extra spaces. And I don't think you will find any project in the downtown that has spaces, because I've done some of them, that has spaces to accommodate its retail. I mean, I know Bridge Street Commons doesn't.
Mhm. Okay,
And I know 502 doesn't. And I know Cedar Village doesn't. So, I mean, if you want to treat the riverfront district different, I'm not sure, but what the interpretation is. But in this case, we were able to actually exceed the parking. And we have 11,000, again, there's 11,000 square feet of, 11, I think it's 11,500 square feet of retail. And
Mhm.
100 and, your requirement is two spaces for each apartment. So that's 184 required. And plus we have extras.
I'm looking,
You have 205, Dominic?
205 is the count that I have here,
That's your total, okay.
total.
I'm looking at the plans and I'm getting 100, I see 187. I see.
That's the older plan. This is the
Okay.
plan once the bottom floor was redone to address the issues.
All right, so I'm not seeing the,
This plan
Newer.
was submitted back in, I believe it was submitted.
The
back in
the
August.
numbers for parking are confusing, so don't feel bad.
yeah.
The
'cause I'm
top
not
right
seeing that
corner,
Because
newer
that
plan
total,
anywhere.
the total is composed of the 2 levels of structured parking plus outside parking.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah, Commissioner
Right.
Mono, on the top right corner of A4 are 3 revision dates. And that's
Yeah,
going by that October 1 A4 sheet. So,
somewhere in here. Okay. So I don't know if there any on-street parking in that area or is it really all
No.
going to be?
No.
Yeah, that's
No, this
kind
is
of what
on
I
Canal
thought.
Street. This is on Canal.
Yeah.
You're literally at, hold on, let me see if one shows it better. Here, you can get a better look.
Yeah.
This is the farm, right here. Right here is where, this is the farmer's market, if you could see my cursor.
mhm,
Yeah.
So the municipal parking is literally across the street.
Oh, okay.
okay. All right, on another topic, do you feel that the height requirement is in compliance with our zoning regs?
Well, I don't know what the zoning reg for the height requirement is, and I don't know what is measured. The building that's proposed is similar in size to other buildings. The height requirement, the height that I have on the plans that were submitted it's 61 feet to the midpoint of the roof. You have other flat buildings. It's clearly under 60 to the, whatever the term is for this, the,
Zoning regulations for the RF district have a 60-foot height limitation, but the zoning regulations define the height of a building as to the highest part of the roof, not the midsole.
Mhm.
okay.
So we have some technicalities that have got to be worked out.
Okay,
And when you get to the back wall of the building, it becomes 10.5 feet more aggravated because the topography drops as you go to the back.
Yeah.
well, I mean,
There's roughly a 10.5 foot difference.
I think you have a height measurement, don't you? I don't know, don't you have it as an average or something, or? I don't have,
What I'm saying is-
unfortunately, I don't have the regulation in front of me.
Somebody has to sit down and address it.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm not the architect, unfortunately, he isn't here. I suppose one of the answers is to put a flat roof on it, like 502.
We're not suggesting that you do that. We're only pointing out the fact that you have something that's got to be addressed.
Mhm. Yeah, I would think that the applicant should propose something as to how to resolve the height issue.
Well, the only way you resolve the height issue is to make it shorter. I mean, if that's
That
what,
works.
I mean.
Or to request an amendment to the zoning regulations as to how we define the height.
When you talk about Attorney Thomas making it shorter, are you proposing eliminating a floor?
Well, you eliminate the floor, you eliminate the project.
Right.
So that's out of the question. I propose it that possibly the best thing is not to, if you want roof elements, then you shouldn't include them in the height. That's a very simple statement, and that's what is in most things. You
I
shouldn't.
think most commissioners would agree with you, Dominic, but we have to rationalize that to the regulations.
All right, well then, and again, I'm not sure what the terms and conditions, remember the property owner is the city of Shelton here, so I'd have to go back and find out. At this point then, if that's the case, if the amendment, the project has to be, if the zoning regulations have to be amended to make them a little more flexible in these situations, because not every building is built on a flat surface. And if I don't have the zoning regulations in front of me, so I know there's a definition of height. I didn't think it was to be measured at the highest point and the lowest point. I thought it was, I don't know, does anybody have the regulation?
I've checked again, Dominic.
What does it say?
That
At the
it goes
highest
to the
point
the highest feature of the roof.
from the lowest point of the land. So in other words, if you have a building that is on, like this one, that's on a sloped area, the measurement, you're saying the measurement has to be from the lowest point of land to the highest point of the roof. That's what the regulation says.
I think downtown it's street side, isn't it? It's from the street.
Dominic, you are allowed to average the elevation of the ground so that you can take into account ups and downs.
Okay, what about what
That's why I say
Commissioner Otto
it's
just said
it's not
about,
something you can answer with 5 minutes of conversation.
okay,
We've been
But
pointing
what
this
about-
out to
but
the applicant for over a year and we don't seem to get a reaction to it.
okay, I'm not aware, to be very honest with you, having presented this from the beginning last June, I'm not aware of the building height being brought up ever before
yes.
in a public hearing.
It has. Yeah, that's why we specifically asked for artist rendering as to how it would look from the river. And that was provided. That was.
No,
on the
well, but
website. Yeah.
no, that was for the elevation. That had nothing to do with height. It was, we wanted elevation, the question was, we want an elevation from the trestle area. So that was presented.
Mhm.
This is the elevation of the plan set that was filed in May,
Yeah,
not the revised elevation. So
Yeah.
these numbers were on it since May.
right.
I'm willing, I mean, again, we can keep the public hearing open. And if the answer is that I have to now file or if the commission wants to do its own amendment to the regulation, if the point is, because this commission cannot vary a reg, and if that's the case, then, and the interpretation is that you must average it, or I don't know, even as Commissioner Maddow said, that if it's even street front, and this is street front. So at street front, it's 61 feet. And if the requirement in the riverfront district is 60, then the client will have to address that. We'll have to change. I mean, the other option, like I said, I don't know, I'm not an architect, but the other option I assume would be simply to change it to make it similar to some of the other buildings in downtown and put a flat roof instead of having.
Once again, Dominic, we're not suggesting that.
Well,
We're not
how else-
suggesting that it isn't an attractive design. All we're saying is that we have to rationalize the difference between what your drawings show and what the regulations require. Now, maybe what it is you take into account the architectural enhancement that the slope roof does and put appropriate wording that allows the commission to exceed the 60-foot height by a certain amount.
Right, well, that's what I mean, but that would be a.
Somebody has to sit down and put those into the right words for the regulation.
Right, but that would require a text change. So what I'm saying to you is that would mean this project would have to go on hold while the text change took place, correct?
Mhm. Okay,
Yes.
before we go to the rest of the commissioners, if you could just go back to what you were saying, this, the floor gets removed, this project doesn't go forward.
Right,
If you're reducing the development, aren't you reducing costs as well? What?
no, you basically, you have a project here that has a unique site. You're reducing a cost a little bit, but you're reducing the economics of scale that you would need. You got to remember, you have a site that is a site that requires an excessive amount of site work related to Burying Ground Brook, as you discovered, plus the fact that off-site, you have to, the applicant has to, any developer has to construct the Riverwalk in
Right,
addition to that. So there's a lot of cost and everything, and this project was designed to economically justify doing those costs.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you know,
Well, wasn't that figured in with the sale of the property though? On the Riverwalk, on the reduction of the sale of the property?
Yeah, the cost was reduced to acquire
it
the
may
site.
have-
Right,
it
right.
may have been done, but that doesn't mean that the applicant can now lose X number of apartments.
No, I agree with you, but you're saying that, you know, it was because of the sale of property. It wasn't. The Riverwalk was taken into consideration with the sale of the property and it was reduced because of that.
Well,
That's
what
all
I'm
I'm
saying
saying.
is-
I'm just making a
Yeah.
fact, that's all.
Right.
Mhm. Okay, so here's some language up on the screen. Is that from Mr. Rossetti?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
So it's from the average ground level within 10 feet of the building to the roof line. And then, you know, in the RFD district, there is flexibility for the commission to allow for a greater roof height, not to exceed X amount.
75 feet.
Correct.
Yes, but
And-
this isn't covered by that, but perhaps language could be put into it.
Whoa. Why isn't this
Why isn't
covered by that?
Yes,
Why isn't this
penthouse-
covered?
is this-
This is,
Are we talking about something similar to a penthouse? Yeah, I
Well, wait a
don't
minute,
think
it
that's
says-
broad enough language to handle it, Dominic. I wish it
to
were.
accommodate penthouses and other similar other rooftop features.
Mhm.
If this is a rooftop feature that is wanted, I mean, I
It's
don't,
not a rooftop feature, it is the roof.
all right, okay. All right,
I wish it were, Don, believe me.
well, no, I mean, I think I think then why does it say other similar rooftop features? There's not defined. So basically, you have a broad discretion in that and you can do it. But if you want to delay the project and,
So what if you were to
Yeah,
put
sure.
what if you were to put some dog houses up there? Would that conform with the regulations?
there are. I think, I don't know what they are. There's some feature,
If the
I don't know, my
doghouse is
screen
a
sharing was taken down, but if you look at the elevation, there was whatever you call, I don't know.
I personally would rather see a peaked roof like that than a flat roof.
Me too.
Absolutely. I think we're all in agreement on that.
mhm.
And so if that means that it's going to exceed, I would say it's a roof line feature. It's a peaked roof versus a flat roof.
I think that makes sense. I think that's reasonable.
I think it's a reasonable interpretation. I'm not going to disagree with that.
That's how I interpret it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have just said, you know, that there has to be. you know,
To the point where a flat roof could be,
Mhm.
it's under 60 feet.
Okay,
To
I
that
just want to acknowledge that Mr. Getz has joined the meeting.
Oh, maybe he has. I don't know.
Sorry, I ran
Okay,
late. I
there.
had another, but I have been on for a few minutes. And if you wouldn't mind, I just wanted to just give you a little bit of information regarding the costs associated with this.
Okay,
One of the commissioners indicated that the Riverwalk was covered under a decreased value for the chromium. That was associated with the brick pavers themselves. The actual Riverwalk construction still is part of this project. But the only, you know, this site is unique, like all of the other sites on Canal Street, unique in the sense of the fact that it was a industrial site with, you know, tremendous amount of mitigation that took place. The mitigation hasn't been completed. All of these sites have certain, you know, features such as spongex and roll fight, if you want to call, you know, how that had to be handled. So there is tremendous amount of cost associated with the development that is not normal. You have features not only dealing with the capping of the brook, but also the fact that the site is a fill site, so requires piles. And there's uniqueness to it. So it's the costs associated with is quite extreme. When I looked at this site, as you can see from the design I created, I wanted to make sure that it made an impression of the downtown. So I went extra on the features of the building, and I would hate to butcher it by attempting to meet a regulation that would knock out some of the features. I think the design is a beautiful design for the location. We're right by the park, so I wanted to make sure that the building made an impression. I think that if we can deal with the interpretation of the regulation, or if need be, if we have to delay it, for some more time to deal with, an amendment or something. But I would hate to. I think, again, unless the commission disagrees, I think the design is a beautiful design, and it's something that I will be proud of. So I would prefer to make sure that we do whatever it takes to build it that way. Decreasing the number of units does present a hardship and cost. Keep in mind that I agreed to pay the city $700,000 for the site. The city is not contributing anything to the capping. The capping alone is almost $300,000, capping of that brook. So all of these costs, you start looking at it, and it becomes overwhelming. If you look at 223 Canal, and that one, I was blessed that the state, with the city's assistance and contribution, provided funding to make that happen. But the site, work on that one was $1.8 million. So, and that was to deal with the environmental issues. On this site here, the city has brought in a lot of fill, more than the site will need, and that fill will have to be removed to create the underground parking. Now, unfortunately, to remove it, we just can't take it somewhere, because it is a brownfield site. Every load will have to be tested. There are environmental companies that have been engaged by the city to deal with the mitigation. They haven't finished their work. There, the site still has a lot of other features, environmental features, that will have to be adhered to. There is the capping and the sign-offs, and I mean, there's still a lot of these sites are, they're not easy to deal with. It's not like going on Bridgeport Avenue and you have a merchant site and you start building. Here, every single one of the sites has had issues, and especially the commission members that have been on the board since I started, 18 years ago, with construction 15 years ago. They've seen what transpired with the Avalon site, what we had to do there, and then 223 Canal and Spongex and so forth. There's, they're not normal features, so they actually cost much more. So one way or another, I think that I would, ask the commission to take the consideration as to the design, allow the building, to be constructed as designed, and then Dominic and I will work with staff to come up with a way to have it so the commission can in fact vote on it. As far as the parking situation, and I'll also get to the lower parking garage level. Dominic, earlier this, this afternoon or this evening, did discuss with me the issues of the flood elevations and so forth. When we submitted the plans at 223 Canal, the street elevation in front of us is, I believe, 27.0. And I think that this site is 26. So it's about a foot difference in elevation. But our approval from DEP was we set the elevation at 18 for the parking garage. It was raised, afterwards, but that was only because it turned out that when the city dealt with the environmental cleanup, there was 4.5 feet of fill that needed to be removed from the site. And, we were looking at, it was $500,000 or $600,000 to do that. And so the decision was to go back too deep and allow us to raise the elevation of the garage. And we actually were able to raise it to 21, I believe, 21.5. But if we look at the approvals that came forward at 223 from DEEP and from the state, it was approved at 18.5. I believe that the lower level of this garage is set at, I believe it's 16 or 15.5.
16.0.
16. So the difference is only 2 feet. At 223 Canal, the way that the construction documents were done, it stipulated that the elevators would have a recall. So in case of a flood, whatever happened, the elevator would go automatically to the first level, but it would not knock out the function of the elevator. The elevator would continue to operate. It just it wouldn't operate to the lower level. All of the construction materials used in the garage level are to be, not waterproof, but meaning, it's all masonry. It's, it's non-destructive, I guess is the word.
Water resistant?
I'm sorry?
Water resistant?
Well, yeah, yes, but it was, and this all has to do, not necessarily, it has to do with FEMA, the flood insurance program, and, so they're looking to protect the building. Look, everybody knows that unless the dam bursts, God forbid, that there's never been really a flood, on Canal Street. When we're talking about, many of you that have been to the Riverwalk, that you're sitting at the Riverwalk and the river is still, even during high tide, still, about 10 feet below the Riverwalk. So, the selection of the elevation here was also, to comply with continuing the Riverwalk in a manner that because, the biggest problem you have is complying with ADA requirements on slopes and so forth. And here it was tough because you were going from the Riverwalk elevation to basically to the railroad track on Canal Street. So the difference, is quite tremendous. I'm confident that the garage, lower level garage, there will never get flooded. Think about it. We have we're capping the brook, and the cap is 6 feet above the bottom of the brook. So the brook runs underneath the parking garage. And I don't know if, to lead us to the study that we did concerning the brook and the capping, there were a couple of, major storm events that took place. One was a major, I forget if it was in July or August, but we had a major rainfall, and the brook was inspected to see how high the water would come up, and it only really came up, I think it was like 12 inches. So it was not, it was not a drastic amount of, of water that came through. So I'm confident that the building, and keep in mind, this is, these are preliminary designs. Once we get into the construction documents, the actual engineering of everything will be done. This is a threshold building, so not only will we be designing it, but it requires, peer review, which means an independent engineer will have to go through and evaluate all of the designs, and then it requires the same engineers to perform special inspections, so it gets built according to the plan and so forth. So, there is safety measures that will be in place as you develop the construction
And
documents.
explain what you mean by threshold building.
Threshold buildings, any building that exceeds a certain amount of square footage, units, parking. It's like with a parking situation here. It's going to require OSTA approval. That's the state, traffic commission approval. There's still a, number of steps that will have to be taken once the zoning commission approves the project. And that's all, threshold buildings are, it's requires by the state. The state has certain requirements. The construction has to be performed by a contractor with major contractor's license, which we have, which is above normal requirement. There's certain requirements for these type of buildings. It's based on square footage. It's based on number of parking, it's number of units, so forth. So that's a threshold building.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm available if anybody has any questions.
Could you just back up
Sure.
back towards the beginning? You said something about the appearance of the building being more important than the height of the roof?
No, I didn't. No, what I meant was that there were certain features within the building that just, I wanted it to be different. I didn't want it to be like all the other buildings that are been going up with flat roofs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, when I designed the building,
Dominic brought that up, not us.
No,
We
yeah,
don't-
no,
Believe me.
I don't, I think that, again, just flat roofs are fine, but my only concern for the downtown is that we're just being repetitive. And I would like to see, some, designs that are different, granted, the heights, look, think about it, 100 years ago, the Birmingham was built, and that's 72 feet tall,
Mm-hmm.
and that sits on the river.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally, the floor-to-floor heights there are 12 feet 6, and we have 6 stories. So, and this was, think of 100 years ago, so I think that there should be some way of having the commission have the ability to, to make certain decisions that are, appropriate for the specific sites. But again, it's the commission's prerogative as to how to handle it.
I think the fact that, as you referred to the Birmingham as being built 100 years ago and still standing, a building like this is going to definitely last at least 100 years. And that's, I think, my personal concern is that it is something that, because it's going to be there for 100 years, it's got to be done right.
Commissioner, I don't disagree. And the only thing I would remind you of is that the Birmingham, and that was, built, 12 years ago, 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We have basement, units,
Mm.
So they're 10 feet or 12 feet below Canal Street. So, and I've never heard of anyone on that level of Birmingham having a water problem.
Okay.
So it's not here, we're talking, I did have to submit to the state a plan of, dealing with in case of floods. And that's pretty common in any area where where parking is below the 100-year flood. And that is that you provide that within the development, there's a rule that's set up. It's whether it's the ownership or the association, whereby there's a way of notifying people that they need to move their cars. But that's pretty common throughout anyway, flood areas. But this building is the way the code requires, or building code, is that the occupiable area or the first occupiable floor be above the 100-year flood. That's the requirement. There are no regulations governing, cars. Yeah.
Okay, any commissioners have any questions for the applicant or?
Chairwoman, Commissioner Perkins.
Go ahead.
I think this conversation has gone on for quite some time, and I think really it's an interpretation of that regulation as to whether the roof line is what exceeds obviously the roof line is what exceeds the regulation. But again, the way it's worded, my interpretation is that the roof line can be considered in addition to the height. So as long as the height of the building itself, the top floor, meets the regulations, I don't really see the issue with that. But that would certainly have to be a consensus on interpretation of our regulations. My question for the applicant is, there obviously is 2 parking places per unit. Are they going to be designated, or is only one spot going to be designated per unit? And are there going to be any charges for that parking?
Well, I think over the years, I've voiced my opinion regarding charging for parking. I think that the way that, I don't think the commission's intention was ever to approve a project, especially when a waiver to the requirement was granted. That it was never, obviously we're talking about the Avalon building, but it was never, there was never proposed that they would be providing 1 parking space per tenant. The proposal was that, or the way that I recall, Commissioner Parkins, I recall you were at the time chair, and you actually went to various Avalon sites to do an analysis of the parking and so forth, because the request was to decrease the parking requirements for it, and eventually the commission agreed that it could be done. But I don't recall ever being mentioned that Avalon was going to charge for an extra space. And I think that they're in violation of the approval, but
not for an extra space. They charge for a
For
space.
every space,
Well,
right?
but
Yeah.
I think they're in violation of the approval that they were granted. Here, the way that I handle these buildings is that 1 space is assigned to every single unit. The rest of the spaces are floating. And the reason why they float is that, you may have, 1 person in an apartment that only has 1 car. He doesn't need the second car. So to assign the second car to that space takes, spaces away from others. I think that the parking in the downtown has always been an issue. It's unfortunate that for whatever reasons, and I've had this discussion, why the parking lot behind the farmers market doesn't get used. I'm told that in many cases, the women are still afraid to park there and walk, to the buildings. But again, as these buildings continue to be developed, there'll be more and more people and more lights and so forth. But here, as I said, I'm confident that we have more than adequate parking for the building and, for the commercial, 205 spaces now is, as Dominic Thomas, mentioned, we have a 2-to-1 ratio for the residents, and we have 21 spaces, extra, which will accommodate the commercial. We are across the street from the farmer's market, which, again, it's the storefronts there's no parking in front of the stores. There's storefront, there's street frontage. So there'll be, people will be walking, from, locations where they would park the cars, and whether they park them on the back of the building or in front of the building, meaning across the street. I think this building in particular will get a lot of use of the parking lot across the street.
Do you, obviously, there's going to be a key fob that's needed to get into the gate, to get into the secured parking in the garage? Is that?
Yeah, that's the intent. What it was, and if you look, the assigned spaces will be in the lower level. There's I believe 105 spaces in the lower, garage, and that will be the secured parking for the residents.
Okay, so there's 2 levels of parking?
Yeah.
Right, the ground
So
level.
the bottom ground level is going to be the secured parking. The second level of parking is just going to be open? Is that what you're
That's
saying?
correct. That will be the floating parking.
Okay. Any consideration to giving the 3 bedrooms an additional spot? 3 bedrooms, it's unlikely that there's only 1 car, but just curious.
I believe we only have like a few of 3-bedroom, but yeah, no, look, it's, when we get into it, we'll figure out the needs for the people. We have plenty of
Right.
parking to provide. I did introduce some of the studio units, which normally it's, one, person, that occupies those. So I think that, because of the unit mix, because of the fact that we do have, percentage of studios, we have a good mix
Right.
for the type of population that we've been attracting into the downtown.
I know we also previously talked about having the outside parking areas possibly reserved for the people visiting the retail.
Well, I had seen that as the outside parking along the right side of the building.
Yeah.
That was what I had, thought that would handle the commercial part of it, that at some point, depending on how the parking situation is, because we won't know until, the building starts being occupied.
Right. Right.
And, because the intent was that if there is enough parking, for the, within the building structure, that those additional parking spaces could be, sort of multi-use. As you can imagine, once the activities take place at Veterans Field, the biggest problem is how to keep people from parking where they should park.
Right.
So that's, it's been, an issue at SPZC and Riverside. But, again, it's, as I said, as these sites continue to be developed, you get closer to the main parking lot, the municipal lot. Look, I've been, I check it periodically. I've been there on weekends. I've been there during certain hours. And it's just amazing that everybody complains about parking, yet, I go to that lot and that lot is, almost vacant.
It's all about convenience. Same thing if you have retail at the bottom of Royal Park, people are going to want to park on one of those right-hand sided spots, run in, get whatever they're getting, especially if it's a deli or a coffee shop. They're not going to want to go into the garage, park up on the second floor, come down and then pick up their lunch. So it's, people are all about convenience these days. We know that, but parking is something that, as long as you meet the regulations, as far as I'm concerned, that, that's going to become, your cross to bear, if you will. And, tenants are, the retail spend especially is going to want some sort of, convenience for their customers. So.
Okay.
And it was our bad to not ask the question for Avalon, which is why the question's being asked. At least since I get back on the commission every time. About
Parking spaces are always included with the units. Okay. And the residents at SPZC, the lofts, They don't, they get their fee, the rental fee, and there's no extra charge for anything else.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Parkins. Any other commissioner?
Yeah, Commissioner Maddow, I guess
Maddow?
going over the same ground a little bit, I'd like to say that I also agree with Commissioner Parkins about the roof line issue and that the regulation, I think, should cover that. Going in to change that regulation, I think, would be a lengthy process and perhaps tie us up in some way in the future. So there's flexibility with the way that's worded right now. And also, I just wanted the floating parking, I'm assuming you mean that it's not assigned, but also not charged, those extra
None of
parking
the,
spaces that you have.
Commissioner, none of the parking spaces will be charged.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Thank
Yeah,
you.
none whatsoever.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, any other commissioner?
Uh,
Commissioner Lesko, go
Chair,
ahead.
on the structural engineering report, exactly when would we be seeing some investigation on the culvert existing condition, the depth of those blocks that they're referring to?
Well, the city engineer Remus, when he sent out for an evaluation, the structural engineer that responded to the request, I don't know if it was a case that he didn't get proper instructions or if he just assumed certain things, but the report that he prepared was a report done based on a completed construction document. The way that this will happen is this: the issues pertaining to the site construction, which includes the capping and so forth, that's part of the final construction documents and permit process. So the way that happens is that we do borings for soil bearing capacity to determine what type of foundation structures are dealt with. The structural engineers evaluate the structure that's on site, meaning the channel walls that exist. And keep in mind, those channel walls have been there for 100 years, 100-some years. So the zoning commission will, unless they decide that they want to review it, they won't get a report. That goes to the building official and the city engineer. And the peer reviewer, which will be an independent structural engineer. So all of those three will, the project engineer will draft the reports for the engineering of the site, which is the structure, the foundation structure, which will include capping of the brook and so forth. That in turn gets submitted to the building official, to the city engineer, and to the independent engineer for their review and comment. And then finally, everybody signs off on it, and and we proceed to build a building. So that's the way it will take place.
Okay.
All right, anybody else? Commissioner Kelly,
No, I'm fine.
Commissioner Usel,
I'm still reviewing the project, but I have no questions at this time.
okay, Commissioner Onofrio, even though you're here as an alternate, we have allowed alternate commissioners to pose questions. So if you
No,
have,
I'm good. Thank you, Ginny.
okay, thank you. All right, so what is, Mr. Getz, if you could just clarify, this particular site is not yet fully remediated, is that correct?
Well, there's still some steps. All of these sites, 223 Canal, there's still two final steps.
Mhm.
What'll happen during the construction is that the soil scientists of record will be monitoring the site, and because there'll be capping involved. Any areas that are landscape will require 4 feet of clean fill.
Mhm.
Any areas that are either paving or concrete will require 12-inch, well, actually a total of 2 feet of
Mhm.
clean, of combination of structural material such as concrete, asphalt, and structural fill. That's what they call capping. So the sites are capped.
Mhm.
And then any of the area, including, quite frankly, the Riverwalk. The Riverwalk, because it is in this type of site, can't just be built as, as a normal. If it's done just with brick pavers and stone dust, you need 4 feet of clean fill underneath it.
Mhm.
If you can't do 4 feet of clean fill, then you have to do a concrete walkway and then put the pavers on top of it.
Mhm.
So there are steps that will have to be adhered to during the process, and then at the end, a land use or LUR, land use restriction map, will have to be submitted to DEP
Mhm.
and recorded. And what that will do is that will assure that in the future, if anyone needs to do any kind of work on site, whether it's excavations or whatever, that DEP has to be notified, and they in turn, provide, oversight.
Okay.
So,
Mhm. So none of what you may come across right at this point you wouldn't know if it's enough to change the whole appearance of the project?
no, I mean, the only thing it does, it just, basically, the city spent a lot of money, as you may be aware of,
Mhm.
demolishing the buildings and doing the environmental cleanup. They did it to the standards that they were required based on the program that the environmental company, structured. Chances are that we will not encounter issues other than the fact that there's too much fill on site.
Mhm.
And that fill will have to be trucked out and disposed of. And to dispose of it, we don't know yet how it's going to be disposed of.
Mhm.
And the reason being is that, if nobody wants fill from, sites that were contaminated, even if the fill is clean, which I'm assuming it is, every single load will have to be tested before it's hauled out.
Mhm.
So it's just a lot more oversight that has to be done. And
Yeah, I thought-
if there's any hot spots, then those hot spots will have to be dealt with, and the fill will have to be disposed of as contaminated fill.
Right. Yeah, I thought all the fill went to some landfill in Ohio or somewhere.
Well, there's Pennsylvania, there's, it depends on the contaminants.
Okay. And
You
could
know.
you just confirm for the rest of the commissioners, we haven't spoken anything recently about affordable housing. What's your intent on this?
Well, I think that, again, it's you're still, I'm assuming you're working on it, but you still need to develop an affordable housing plan,
Mhm.
for, for development. But here, I had offered, I forget, I think it was 8 or 9 units. I had offered,
Mhm.
I believe it was the studio units. There was some complaint, I believe was from Commissioner Parkins on, why don't we have certain mixtures? And, and again, for me, it's dollars and cents, obviously.
Mhm.
So whether or not, all I can tell you is this, that I made a commitment to provide, some of the units. I'll work with staff, to come up with a program that makes economic sense, for everybody.
Yeah, has staff, Mr. Rossetti, do you know if anyone investigated that and clarified?
That was my question as to
Yeah.
whether limiting it to just one type of apartment actually conforms to the state statute, because if it's not going to help us count against, our affordable housing count, then
For the city, look, as you may be aware, I do, I develop hundreds of affordable housing units. I've been doing it for a long time. There's 2 different types of programs. One is what's forced on you by the 830G statutes.
Right.
And within the 830G statutes, you have to provide an equal part of each type of unit.
Mhm.
So, but that has to do with, you know, the actual zoning program associated with 830G. When it comes to the number of units that the city has that count towards your affordable unit count, if it's voluntary, it doesn't, you know, they all, you know, as long as it's, you know, obviously, because the issue is that in order for them to count, then they have to be deed restricted or restricted for, I believe it's 40 years. So, you know, it's
We just
not-
wanted to ensure that that was indeed the case. We just asked
Yeah.
staff to confirm that for affordable housing, if it's limited to only one type of unit, that it would still count for us. So we just wanted confirmation on that.
I can assure you it does.
Yeah.
As long as they're deed restricted and they become part of the affordable housing stock for the city, which means on an annual basis, there's reporting that has to be submitted. I don't know who within the city, I don't know if it's the city's housing authority, I don't know who's doing that. But that's something that the commission will have to, you know, investigate and develop, because as you proceed down the road of, you know, requesting or requiring developers to provide a certain percentage of units, regardless of the types, then, you know, someone has to monitor and, you know, in order to, you know, it's a program. You know,
It's the only thing that's going to enable us to stop 830G development.
Well, you know,
That
the
is the
good thing,
responsibility of the landlord to do that annual reporting and confirm that the income requirements have not been exceeded for his tenants. So, any other questions for the applicant? Okay, what's the consensus of the?
Well, before you close the public hearing, the
Sure.
only issue I have is I've heard commission members express their interpretation of the riverfront regulation concerning height and the flexibility. My concern would be if the public hearing were closed and
there consensus?
there isn't a consensus on the commission with respect to that regulation. I just, you know, because if there is consensus, it's a problem. If there is not consensus and a text change is needed, then I think one of the options might be to just leave the public hearing open while the text change goes through. There appears to be a consensus. Obviously, my opinion is the same. It says or penthouse or roof things, and I think that would the commission has the right to interpret its own regulations. So that I just leave it at that. Because there were two commission members. I'm not talking about the height one, the other one, the riverfront district one. Oh, there it is. Okay, that one there.
Yeah, I think we need to get a clarification of what
Is not there.
similar other rooftop features are specifically.
You're the ones that clarify.
Yeah,
It's your regulation. There's no one else that's gonna do it.
yeah,
Uh,
that's what I'm saying.
We
I
need
mean,
Corporation Council to look at that.
Well, I'd like to hear Tony's opinion again.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I think there's sufficient sufficient latitude in the words that were chosen that would allow the commission to come to that conclusion. And I think if everybody's in agreement with that, when we come to write up this decision, we will point that out so that it won't look like an oversight.
Right.
Would it total not more than 50% of the building roof area, though? Do we meet that part?
Well, I'm going to go through and double check it all. I think we're okay with it.
I just want to make sure that we're all
I
clear
just
on
want
what,
to make it clear that in the future, that interpretation is not used to create a higher building with another story on it.
Mhm.
In other words, the intent of the 60-foot height limitation is being satisfied. Now, this is a matter of handling the technicality due to the steeply pitched roof, the size of the building, and the extreme topography on the site.
Mhm.
And a
And
roof that we
We'll do it.
desire.
Well, we will mention that, those features in your decision.
Mhm.
I just want to remind the commission that I believe that this is the last site, is it not, on the Riverfront District?
Yeah, but there's no guarantee it wouldn't be used somewhere else, John.
Well, I'm just saying, as far as the current zoning of land on the river, this is the
You're
last
right.
site.
This is the last one that's zoned
Mhm.
RFD. But, it's conceivable that somewhere else on the river, someone may decide that that's an appropriate zone to use.
Mhm. I just want to make sure that we're all in a understanding what other similar rooftop features are. So are they?
Quite
HVAC
frankly, that
units?
was not the original intent when we wrote it. But
Yeah.
I can understand the possibility of making that interpretation if the commissioners are comfortable with it.
Mhm.
I'm not totally unhappy with it. I just want to make sure you guys are.
Mhm.
We've so far, well, we know Ruth and Elaine have are supportive of that approach, so.
Mhm. Okay, one of the things, Mr. Guest, could you remind us all, or do you have electric charging stations somewhere on the property?
Yeah, we'll handle that when we start doing the construction documents, but it's now it's pretty common practice now on all of the developments that you add, depending on the number of parking spaces. In this case, we probably have 2 stations. We just have to decide where the appropriate location for them will be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so is there the understanding to continue the public hearing or close the public hearing among the commissioners?
Well, I would suggest that if you don't have a consensus on the roof line, that you keep the hearing open so that it can be addressed. If not,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
if everybody's in agreement of that interpretation, then I don't see any reason. My opinion is there's no reason to keep the hearing open.
Mhm.
I agree with Ruth. I'm okay with that agreement. I think a slope roof is a much better answer. A flat roof, you have a lot more loads, you have problems with the drains, so on and so forth. So I think it's a good idea.
Mhm.
Would it hurt to get a second opinion from Corporation Counsel?
That's,
It's awfully complex to get him involved at this stage of the game.
why is that, Tony?
Well,
We
I'm going to play Corporation Counsel here.
And then
You
Attorney Thomas,
interpret the
Thomas.
regulations. What?
Attorney Thomas, let Mr. Panicle finish his thought first.
Well, I think in order to get a proper response from Corporation Counsel, you really got to make him aware of the entire background. And that means spending a couple hours and explain how it all came about and what we had in mind and what the comfort level of the commission is, the timing and sequence of this particular project. It's all involved here. It's not any one item that says this is why we're doing it. So it's not an easy thing to explain.
Yeah, so Ruth and Elaine's interpretation is good with me. Just, figuring that it wouldn't hurt to get a second opinion.
I can imagine him giving a very equivocal opinion, frankly, where I don't know that it would be clarifying.
Mhm.
I can tell you what his opinion most likely would be.
It's up to us.
The body that's required to interpret the zoning regulations is the Planning and Zoning Commission. That
Exactly.
drafted the regulation.
Yeah.
That's what the law
Your
is.
regulation.
Yeah.
Unless
I'm
it's
comfortable
being
with the building
challenged.
height and how the regulation is written.
I mean, by all means, when we're through writing it up, we'll run the whole resolution by him.
Mhm. All right, that would be helpful, that's for sure. So,
I don't think we're, having a problem with this proposal. It's just we don't want to trip ourselves up with the future proposal and having
That's why I want to make sure I put enough language into this decision to support your interpretation.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, we can't
And
be
I
setting
want
down.
to make sure I mention enough in there so that it can't be abused on a future decision and say, well, you interpreted that on that project.
Right.
I want you to do it here also. And by the way, it allows me to have another floor on the building.
Right.
Right,
That's a
Right.
no-no.
right. It's basically the living space follows the regulation. It's just the commission's desire to have a more decorative peaked roof rather than a flat roof.
And
Mhm.
right, I want to be able to, I want to cite that absent that interpretation, the applicant had the option of putting a flat roof on the building.
Mhm. All right, so are we leaning to then, for that reason, keeping it open?
No,
I'll say that I think a peaked roof is better than a flat roof.
It is.
yeah, why would we keep it open, Chairwoman?
I'm just making sure that we all understand where Mr. Panico is leading towards.
Well, I think he's talking about the resolution is where he would address this interpretation.
Yeah, I want to make sure that it doesn't come to a, when that resolution is discussed, that all of a sudden we realize, ooh, we missed something here,
Yeah,
and we.
The absolute worst thing that could happen is if that were to happen, you would have to deny it without prejudice, correct the regulations and go through the motions of another hearing.
Mhm.
the only reason to keep the hearing would be to request additional information, and I don't think we're looking to request additional information from anyone.
No, we're not. So, all right, if there is no further discussion on it, so floor is open for someone to make a motion
I'll make a motion
for,
to close the hearing.
okay, there's a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Commissioner Lascos.
Okay, there's a second from Commissioner Lascos. So on the motion made by Commissioner Kelly to close the public hearing, seconded by Commissioner Lascos, I'll do a roll call. Commissioner Lascos,
Aye.
Commissioner Parkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Usel,
Aye.
Commissioner Motto,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Okay, so we are done with that agenda item. This item would be on an upcoming agenda for discussion by the commission. So we'll move on to our second public hearing, and that agenda item is initiation of a public hearing for application 2126 Dogtopia Chiller Management LLC at 850 Bridgeport Avenue, Assessors Map 18, Lot 23. Petitioning for a major modification of PDD number 2 to amend the statement of uses and standards to permit dog care services, including but not limited to daycare, grooming, training, and overnight boarding. Is the applicant present?
Yes.
Okay, so identify yourself for the record, please.
My name is Beatrice Yang, and I represent the landlord of Shelton Place.
Okay, so what do you want to tell us about this particular application?
I want to introduce also our tenants who are in the meeting, Jim Riley and Kayla Seeley. While Dogtopia is a national tenant, we're really fortunate in that our tenants for Shelton are locals, and that wasn't mentioned on the information that we provided. I trust everyone received the initial request, which was in November,
Mhm.
and then the follow-up information that was provided last week.
Yeah, there was a number of documents put on the city's website by staff as required.
And just to review, we are very fortunate to have Panera as a tenant for 15 years. Panera has vacated. Dogtopia would take 100% of the Panera space. And we've found a really great partner here. And we're looking at a long-term lease. And being that Jim and Kayla are are nearby in Trumbull. And they have a relationship with Shelton. We just think it's a really good fit. And, we're here to answer any questions that weren't covered in the presentation.
Well, can you give us a little bit, or perhaps Jim and Kayla could give us some information on how they specifically plan to operate the business? I know you have, I think it's the operating hours, or are they from 7 to 7 or something?
Yes. So, Kayla, do you want to run through this, or I can go through the information that we presented recently?
Sure, no, happy to talk about it. Good evening. So, yes, our operating hours.
Hey, look, before you go on, you need to identify yourself and give your address for the record.
Sure.
Thank you.
Kayla Seeley, 855 Main Street, Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Mhm.
So yes, we're very excited about the Shelton space. Jim and I are Trumbull residents, and this is a location that is near and dear to our heart. We currently operate 19 Dogtopia locations from Boston down to Raleigh, North Carolina.
You have 19 of these locations?
We do.
Yes.
Wow, okay.
So we have 19. We are the largest operating Dogtopia franchisees, and we're very excited to bring this project to Shelton, Connecticut, as it is the closest to our hometown. And to answer the former question, our operating hours typically are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week. And that is for our lobby hours, daycare hours for daycare dogs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, seeing that, do you have the Milford facility as well?
So Milford is part of our network. They're part of the same family, but we are not the franchisees of that location. Our closest location to Shelton is Norwalk, Connecticut,
Mm-hmm.
which opened in December, actually.
Just last month?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, yeah, because I saw that their application specifically mentioned Norwalk, but when I went on the national website and it showed the US map with all the locations, and when it does enlarged to just the Connecticut ones, I saw Milford, and so that's why I was wondering why it wasn't mentioned on your paperwork.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had said in the paperwork you were going to have no more than 6 employees on site at a time?
Correct.
Okay, how did you arrive at that number?
So we typically operate 3 playrooms, which would be the same model for our Shelton location. 3 playrooms is 3 canine coaches, plus we have someone who covers the front desk, as well as the manager, and a rover, which essentially is someone who runs the dogs from pet parents' cars to the playrooms, checks dogs in and out, assists with spa services such as baths and nail trims. So in I'll say a full volume location, we typically have 6 employees on at one time. In the beginning, it could be 4 or 5 employees versus 6, but 6 is typically the max.
Okay. So the people that are in each of the playrooms, so there's only one person in a playroom at a time supervising?
Typically 1, depending on the volume of the room that day or the play style of the room that day. Sometimes we have a second canine coach in that room, but our typical setup is for 1 canine coach per playroom.
Okay, and I know your site plan also, besides identifying the names of the different rooms, it gave the capacity each room. And so what's your total capacity overall?
So our total capacity overall, I believe, is 100 dogs, 33, 36, 33, it might be 104.
Okay.
104, excuse me, 104 dogs?
If they took everybody, that's the capacity of all 3 rooms out.
Correct.
You're fully full. Yeah. I'm coming up with 107, but that was from earlier. 38 in one, 36 in another, and 33 in a third.
Yep.
No, okay. All right. Tell me a little bit about your outdoor play area. That seems to be what what Panera use as their outdoor patio dining.
Mhm. So currently, we're not pursuing outdoor play. We had originally sketched out if we were to do outdoor play, what were the possibilities? So that's the sketch that you're seeing there. As of this point in time, we're not pursuing outdoor play. We're just pursuing the indoor facility.
Okay, so you're withdrawing that portion from this application.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I was concerned about that because I said, gee, there's only access to that outdoor play area from the toy room. And how would the dogs in the romper and in the gym be brought to that outdoor play area internally? So, and I was also a little concerned as the fact that Domino's is next door. They have walk-in customers. How were you going to be segregating or preventing any interaction between dogs and any Domino's or Staples clients? So
Yeah.
okay.
At this time, that's not part of our application.
Okay.
And I apologize, I didn't send a revised plan that shows the outdoor play is not included.
Okay. Now, what about your other part here also would be to allow overnight boarding? I see in one of the pictures, there's 6 crates in the spa, where the dogs would be held until it's their time to get a bath or get trimmed or whatever, or while after they're groomed and waiting their pet parent to come and pick them up. But where would the overnight boarding be situated?
So the overnight boarding actually takes place within our playrooms. So it's the same thing for nap time during the middle of the day from 12 to 2 each day. We have our nap time, which also includes any dogs that would receive lunch during that time. Not all dogs receive lunch, but it gives them a little bit of a break, allows us to sanitize the rooms from top to bottom. But in the same playrooms, we also have the home style crates. So similar to what you may have in your own home for your own pup. Similar style crate, that's where the dogs board overnight. So they're all there together.
Which is the playroom? You have gym, romper, and toy. Which one are you referring to? All 3 are playrooms?
All 3, yes. They're separated by size and temperament. So
right.
The toy dogs, obviously, they're the small dogs, typically 30 pounds or less. The romper is more of your adolescent play style, year or 2 old type of, excited puppy. And the gym is also medium to large dogs, but might be more mature with their play style and have more of the play style behaviors.
So you would have cages in each of those 3 rooms?
Or we have the crates in each of the 3 rooms.
But specifically for overnight boarding?
Also for nap time from 12 to 2 each day. Same.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the overnight boarding. It's as to how that would be handled. Is the interior of this building have sprinklers?
Yes, it does.
It is.
It will have sprinklers going forward.
So
Commissioner Archer,
yes, go ahead, Commissioner Kelly.
yeah, I have one question. Is someone staying there overnight with the dogs, or do you have 24-hour supervision, or how do you handle that?
Great question. Yeah, so we do have 24-hour surveillance. Typically, the last employee leaves around 10:30 p.m. each night.
Surveillance, you mean cameras?
Cameras, temperature, water, basically anything you can think of, anything. We have sensors and surveillance for every option within the facility. So if the temperature drops below 66 degrees, we get a notification. If there's any moisture that's detected, any motion that's on the camera, any of those things, we do get a notification for that.
And you would have someone assigned to go to that facility if there was a problem? Or
Correct.
do you go yourself? Or
So normally, as I said, we stretch from Boston down to Raleigh, North Carolina. Yes, we have a full plan in which there's multiple people that receive the notification. In the case of Shelton specifically, Jim and I live in Trumbull. So we specifically would be the first to respond to that location.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
But if you're on vacation,
Then we always have a designated person, but I
okay,
will,
local.
mhm. Yeah, so that person would be local.
What's that?
there's
Yeah,
a-
just, just say worst case scenario, somebody breaks into the place because there's great dogs in there. You'd be notified, somebody would immediately actually call police, I would assume, and then go there as well, correct?
Correct. So even before we would respond, all of those sensors already go off. So whether it's fire, police, et cetera, all of those things are already activated while we're also within 8 minutes from the location.
So they're directly wired to the fire department? They would be? Okay, to an alarm system, okay. How many dogs are you allowed to have max? Is there a limit? How many you can have?
So I believe on this plan, we're about, I think the final number was 107 in that location. That's daycare capacity at full occupancy
Per day?
per day
Wow.
across 3 rows.
Mhm.
Wow, it's a lot of
As,
pups.
as far as overnight,
Mhm.
with the alarms and whatnot, there, do you have a visual alarm? Do you have cameras that someone could go in a computer and look up to see if there's a problem or something, or how do you?
Absolutely. Yes, right on our phones, actually. So the alert that
Okay.
comes through actually gives a clip directly of the camera that has been triggered.
So it's
Okay,
like the Ring doorbell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a limit as to how many dogs you would have overnight?
Typically, not specifically, but I would say typically the capacity for boarding overnight is about 60% of our daycare dogs, but it really depends on the volume of the season. So if it's a high boarding season such as spring break,
Mhm.
whereas we're not taking in as many daycare dogs, then of course we can accommodate more boarding dogs.
Mhm. What about that, also the other statement in your, what it would be include is training. What kind of training are you referring to? Nighttime one-on-one training with an expert and a person and their dog, or just having the dogs in a group being shown a treat and all taught how to sit?
Great question. So some of our locations have certified trainers in them. Almost all of our locations offer what we refer to as puppy play groups. So that's really about getting young dogs socialized to a group
Mhm.
setting. So that's really what we're referring to as training here. In some locations, we do have advanced training classes, more so on the obedience style, smaller type of group settings, sometimes one-on-one settings. But typically it's puppy play group that we offer once or twice a week that gives small pups an opportunity for 45 minutes at a time to get acquainted to being around other dogs.
That's all part of your daytime operation.
Correct.
Okay. The reason I brought that up too is because you had mentioned the last employee usually leaves around 10:30 at night. So I'm wondering between 7, which is when the last daycare dog is supposed to be picked up, until the last person leaves, what's going on for those 3 hours? Is it just cleaning the facility or doing paperwork, or what? Are there training classes going on?
No training classes. So typically at 7 o'clock at night, that's really just when our lobby closes.
Mhm.
So all of the employees are still on site at that point.
Mhm.
During that time, that's when the pups who are staying overnight with us would get their dinner meal.
Mhm.
So they would be allowed to get their dinner meal, then they'd come back out for some playtime, be able to use the bathroom before going back into bed for the night.
Okay. And speaking
Commissioner Archer.
go ahead, Commissioner Kelly.
One other question. Are you going to do anything with soundproofing so, your neighbors aren't hearing, dogs all day?
Absolutely, yes. In every location, we assess sound attenuation, make sure whether it's the walls go all the way up to the roof deck, if we need to put specialized insulation in. We have locations where there's apartments or other tenants above us. So we make sure that there is no noise or barking or anything that is heard to neighboring tenants or outside the building.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, you started to talk about using the bathroom. How especially is the facility going to accommodate animals that need to relieve themselves, you don't, I don't believe addressed anything about that, or, walking outside. How's that going to be handled? Is it the dogs are expected to relieve themselves wherever and it gets cleaned up immediately?
Correct. So the dogs relieve themselves in the playroom. It is cleaned up immediately. So any liquid waste is mopped up. Any solid waste is picked up immediately. It's double bagged. That way there's no odor that comes from it. And the pet safe cleaning chemicals that we use also include a bioenzymatic digester. So it helps to break down the material as well as help with any potential odor that could come from it.
Mm-hmm. How large are these cages that overnight dogs would be put in?
How large?
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the size of the dog. So small dogs obviously are in smaller crates. Essentially, they need to be able to stand up, move around within the crates for that to be the case, as well as we also have an option for some larger isolation suites as well. For sometimes we have sibling dogs that might stay overnight together that can stay in those areas.
Okay, are you referring to the couple of the rooms that are shared evaluation? You've got two of those.
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, if somebody had more than one dog and they were maybe on the larger size, instead of having to find a crate large enough, the two dogs would be placed to stay in one of those rooms.
Correct. But I can tell you, I have a Great Pyrenees at home who is a very large dog. She stays very well in a large crate, as do 95% of our dogs.
Right. Okay. Yeah, there are a lot of facilities that have dog rooms that they have access to an outside play area through a trap door. And so they were sometimes let out and permitted to run around to do their business in that secured area. And, this facility doesn't have that kind of setup. So what about, what's your protocol going to be if a dog is injured in the facility? Do you have a vet on call, or will the owner be contacted and expected to come and get the pet, or what?
So it depends on the situation, but we always have an emergency vet that is on our contact list, as well as our designated vet. So in an emergency, after hours, on the weekends, et cetera, we use the emergency vet. For any routine things that might come up while a dog is in our care, such as maybe an eye infection or anything like that, we would use a routine vet. Our number one choice is always the pet parent's vet that they currently use.
Right.
Dog is there for daycare and someone is local within the community. The first thing that we always do is we contact the pet parent. If a pet parent is out of town, then of course we contact them, but we also take care of vet care for them in their absence. And depending on the hours, we would either go to our regular vet or the emergency vet, just like a regular pet parent would do.
So you have some kind of vehicle that would be able to be used for that, or is it going to be a person's private car, one of the staff members?
It's typically the general manager who's there. Very experienced and familiar with transporting dogs in the need of any medical attention.
Yeah, I mean, if they had a large SUV or whatever, that may be suitable. So what about licensing by the state? Do you have all that?
Correct, yes. So we have to go through a kennel license with the state. So they come in, they do a thorough inspection. They look at all of our cleaning chemicals. They look at our room setup in our spa to make sure that we have proper equipment for everything. They do a really nice job making sure that everything is set from top to bottom. And before we can open, we have to get that approval, of course.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Meyer.
Yeah, I used a daycare for my dog in the past in another town, and once you were signed up, you could come anytime. You didn't have to have a reserved place. So you never got there and found out they were full for the day. You didn't have to worry about that. I just wonder what your procedure is for drop off.
Yeah, so we always recommend that pet parents book in advance, and that's just to make sure that they reserve a spot. Until a facility is completely at capacity on a regular day, then it's not an issue with any type of reservations or anything like that. But we do make it much easier for our pet parents that they can log in. The app that they have available allows them to request daycare services, boarding, spa services, as well as view our pet parent cameras. So I would say it's quite rare, minus maybe a major holiday like 4th of July or something like that, that we're not able to accommodate anyone. But still, anyone who comes to our doors that day just for a drop-off visit, we're typically able to take that pet parent and their pup.
But you're telling most of your people to make a reservation ahead of time.
Most pet parents prefer it.
Mhm.
Just easy for them to have access on the app. So they know right away that their appointment is accepted, and then that way they don't have to worry about when I get there, is there going to be an issue or anything like that.
Okay. Any other commissioners?
Chairwoman, I have a couple of questions. Thank you for submitting your PowerPoint presentation. It provides a very good visual of the cages and what the rooms look like. Knowing the layout of Panera, the windows where your lobby leads into the hallway is where your where direct sunlight would come in, or direct daylight would come in. Will those, according to this PowerPoint, I don't know if this is, I'm sure this isn't the exact location, but you have windows that lead out to the hallway so that the dogs do get actual daylight? Is that how you, or will that not be the case with this facility? Just curious.
So typically what we do with the windows is we make sure that at least at the height that the dogs can see out of, or that they could potentially see in, someone standing outside the window, that is covered up either by, a tinted glass or a branded type of film. And that's really just for, the safety within the room, to make sure there's no distraction outside. They're not constantly looking outside. But
is there at least some daylight, some natural light that's allowed to come in for them?
It depends on how high the windows go in the facility. Sometimes we leave, a 3 or 4 foot area on top of where the film goes. Well,
I'm just saying that where your hallway is going to be, where your rooms are off of, it's the natural light windows are on the other side. So if you're heading down the hallway, your playrooms are to the right-hand side, the windows are to the left. Are there going to be windows in the rooms that would allow natural light in for the dogs? Or is it just going to be solid wall?
So within the gym and toy rooms, there would be some form of that. But typically within our facilities, there's plenty of light that's allowed, as well as, the fresh air that comes in. We have 100% fresh air exchange. So it feels very much like the outdoors to them, similar to a dog park that you would bring your pup to.
Okay, another question I have is in relation to the other facilities that you franchise, how is this size how is the size of this facility in comparison to those? Is it the smallest? Is it medium sized? Is that what dictates how many dogs you can have? What dictates how many dogs you can have on a given day?
So definitely the footage of the rooms is the #1 indicator, but also depends on staffing as well. So if we have 2 playrooms that are open, we can't take 107 dogs within 2 playrooms. That has to be across 3 playrooms. So at that point, we would, limit our capacity to accommodate those 2 playrooms. But I would say that this facility is pretty much within our standard model of what all of our daycares that we're building are. So somewhere between 5,000, 5,500 square feet, sometimes 6,000 square feet, but I would say pretty consistently right around 5,000 square feet.
Pretty average. Okay. All right. Thank you. And so there'll be no outdoor activity at all.
So at this point, we are proceeding with the application without outdoor play, and then we want to review our options for potential outdoor play, possibly in the future.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yeah, I think to address Commissioner Parkins' question, if you're standing on the sidewalk in the front entrance, the wall to the right is the common wall between what was Panera Bread and Domino's. So there is no chance of any exterior windows there, I think. But the gym back wall and side wall may have that. But going also back to Commissioner Parkin's earlier statement about the security and how would you know if there's movement inside or somebody's breaking in, is because it's very commonplace for even city pounds to be broken into and pets taken or animals taken out of it. So if this to have put your pet there and not have knowledge of whether or not they're going to be totally secure overnight would be disturbing, to say the least. So there is a reason to keep it enclosed like it's presented, but there is also a balance as to make sure that there is some light getting in there. And you know, it's not like some other places that I've seen where you have a double slider door that leads out to an enclosed courtyard and they get the light that way. So any other questions for any of the commissioners? Okay, now one of the other things that you submitted in your packet is also the signage. And I'm looking for the page that has that on it. One rendering showed the monument sign is pretty consistent. It looks like there was just a sign height. The height of the letters looked a little different from one version to the other, but the one on the building, on the side of the building, seemed to be consistent. But on an earlier version, you had the name of the facility over the peaked corner section. Now it's over what would be considered the outdoor Panera's outdoor dining patio. Is there a reason for the change?
So nothing has been decided with the signage as of yet. So those are just renderings of different placements that we've used to, you know, look to see what our signage might look like if we put it on the bump out there or recessed over the patio versus what is on the side. But we have not finalized our signage package as of yet.
Okay, so that's not an action that we could pursue at this time.
But
Correct.
if it would be useful to hear if the commission has an opinion on these options. There are renderings, but you know, if you have feedback, we'd love to hear it.
No, I think what has to happen is that you have to present your final option, and then we take it from there as whether or not we find it suitable. It's not our place to say you should do this. I mean, there's some things times in prior meetings that we have said, and besides the fact too, we have a zoning subcommittee. They need to review this as well. And there's usually the Chairman Motto is Commissioner Motto is the chair of the zoning subcommittee, and we've been asking applicants to make sure that they present their materials so that there's a 30-day review period so that they can have adequate time to look it over. So is there any?
And staff will advise you as to the exact regulations that you have to follow in terms of size and those
Yeah,
details.
the sign regulations.
Right.
Yeah,
Correct.
exactly. Yeah.
And our sign manufacturer, I believe, has already researched the code and has given us a couple of recommendations, but we just included on here for the sake of visualization what the possibilities could be.
Right. That's good. Yeah. Well, just caution you is please don't have something manufactured ahead of time and expect us to approve it. That's happened before, and it does not.
Yes.
No, definitely not. I promise. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. So go ahead, Commissioner Parker.
I just have one more question. I just want to confirm so that just to make sure that it wasn't an error. In the slide deck that you provided, you state a maximum of 6 employees on site at a time. Is that
Correct.
Minimum or maximum? That's the maximum amount you would have?
That's typically the maximum, yes.
Okay.
6 is usually the maximum.
So
And
that
with
means,
those 6 folks, you can handle 107 dogs a day.
Correct.
God bless them. I don't think I could handle 1 dog, to be honest with you.
We call them guardians for a reason.
Okay.
Very similar to lifeguards, and they are amazing at what they do. But it's also why we have additional staff on site to help out in a room in the event that high energy day, such as the day in which I drop my dog off, they usually jump in there to help out.
All right. And last question, if you are to get approved, what time frame are you looking to fit out this space?
Yeah, we're hoping to move forward as quickly as possible. So we would start on construction drawings right away. Our build out typically takes about 3 months. Then we go through a training period and open. So our goal truly is to be open by the summer, if at all possible. I'd love to get my pup in there for sure for some summer daycare. And most especially my kids go to daycare across the street themselves.
Okay.
So I'm very much looking forward to incorporating into my morning routine, dropping my 2 kids off, and also my Great Pyrenees who needs a daycare every day for sure.
so you didn't want to propose to your children's daycare that they open up a facility or another room in that
You know
building?
what? Yeah, I think that they have their hands full with my kids as it is, just like my dog. So they're all a handful.
Okay,
All right. Thank you.
all right, thank you very much. Is there any other commissioner has any question? Mr. Panico, how about yourself?
The only question that I had right now is, are there any proposed modifications to the exterior of the building other than the signage?
None,
Painting or anything like that?
not at this time.
Okay, so as the building is exterior, that's the way it will remain?
Yes, the interior will be a brand new build out and will replace the HVAC, but no exterior changes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and just to be the person who's always like the bearer of bad news, what would your opinion be if the commission was to approve but eliminate some of your uses that you've applied for? So if we were to say, sure, you could have grooming and you could have daycare, but no overnight boarding, and training has to be done at a specific time or something. If it no nighttime boarding and no nighttime training, would you be open to something like that?
So nighttime training is not an issue. Training, as I described, is typically puppy play group. Most often we do it Saturday mornings around 10 or 11 a.m. For about 45 minutes. Overnight boarding for our business is essential. Just based on anyone who has a dog, the place that you bring them every day for daycare typically is also the place that they're familiar with, that the staff is familiar with, and therefore that's where you're going to, trust your pup to be cared for. So without overnight boarding for us, that's very much detrimental to our business, and is required for our business use for sure.
You're saying, is it required because of the franchise language, or is it just a matter of economics?
It's required across the board. So basically everyone has overnight boarding. There's 177 currently operating Dogtopia locations. They all have overnight boarding, and also from an economic standpoint and from a customer and dog standpoint, it would be most beneficial for them to be able to both go to daycare and board at the same facility.
Okay, very good.
Chairwoman, I do have one additional question.
Go right ahead.
During the pickup, when folks come to pick up their fur babies, is there an outdoor area where they could relieve themselves? I know a lot of them get excited about getting in a car or whatever. Is there an outdoor area for them to relieve themselves before getting into their owner's car?
Yeah, so there is a grass area that is available there. We also typically keep like waste bags that are outside as well for any dogs that might need to relieve themselves. What we found, and this became extremely popular during COVID time, is that we offer a curbside drop-off and pickup service. So when pet parents are on their way to pick up their pup, they let us know within the app that they're on their way so we can have their pup ready. And then when they arrive, they pull up. Our rover actually runs the pup out to the car, and they're basically there. Typically, it's under 2 minutes. On a very busy time, it might be 5 minutes, but the same thing for drop off. So it's a very quick, seamless process. But I would say the pups typically relieve themselves within the playroom, so they're not super anxious to go as soon as they get outside.
Is with the landlord asking Ms. Yang, is the landlord going to put any restrictions on the fact that, yeah, why there is that grassy area with the trees that parallels Armstrong Road, that the Dogtopia would or would not be allowed to use that?
I think we would just see if it becomes an issue in terms of sanitary, maintenance and we have landscapers who are wonderful, and of course we don't want to make their jobs harder.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the property, the appearance of the property has always been kept up.
Yes.
And I think Mr. Totus,
Yes.
both is the one that oversees it, and he's been
Yes.
involved with it. So
we don't want to make his job harder, but I mean, I think we don't have a firm answer. Yes, I think if it becomes an issue, we'll address it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would rather see it being one way or the other rather than let's wait and see in a way. So
we keep a very tidy space. So while we have the waste bags available for the pet parents, just like the interior of our space, which we clean multiple times a day, same thing. We have checklists that require going out in front of the building, making sure there's any debris or trash that has accumulated in any surrounding area. We make sure that we keep it tidy at all times.
Yeah, I think in the past when the Marketplace Shopping Center on Bridgeport Avenue was opening up, what Big Y is, we were presented with the application for what the heck is the name of it? Where all the beauticians and spa services are. My
salon.
My salon. And we sort of sat back and said, you want to do what? You have these individual rooms for what? And we were all very concerned about it because of the way they presented it. So the zoning administrator set up a tour of their facility down in Fairfield, and I would say a good 4 or 5 of us went down at that date and time and toured it, and that really helped to alleviate the concerns that we had as to what was being proposed. So I'm familiar with daycare centers and everything, but it may be something that we might want to take advantage of on an individual or group basis. It's just that that's a semi-corporate area, besides it being a commercial area right across the street. You've got a lot of traffic that goes in and out of the buildings there. So we would definitely not want it to turn into looking like less than how it's been kept. That's for sure. So yeah, I know for one, it's the location that would be of much concern to me on this. Any other comments from any other commissioners?
Madam Chair, I have one question for the.
Sure, Commissioner Usel, right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So it's regarding the curbside pickup. Will there be any parking spots marked for curbside pickup?
There will. So similar to how Panera was set up previously, they had designated parking on the side of the building. We would utilize those same parking spaces for the curbside pickup. And also, as I said, they can alert us within the app. We also keep an eye out for any pet parents that are coming. Sometimes they call us. And we also have very strict protocols as far as transporting the dogs with, in and out of the facility, with having double leads at all times to make sure that they're safe.
Thank you.
Okay. That's a good point, Commissioner Usel, because if commissioners who've been on the commission for a while may remember when we were very concerned about people who needed to just run into Panera and pick up as they were parking along the curb. And we wanted to discourage that at all costs. So that's why that additional parking area was put in.
Yeah. It made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Dogtopia has the option to designate it for their pet parents. Kayla, could you share what percentage of pet parents do the vehicle drop off, pick up, as opposed to walking in to get their dog?
Yeah, I would say at this point, it's probably close to 70% of our pet parents utilize that. Typically when they're coming in our building, it's because it's either their first time, so they're coming for a meet and greet where we conduct the full evaluation and introduce them to our pack, or they're coming for a boarding stay. So they might bring any bedding with them or food, etc. So at that point, they might be within our facility for 10 or 15 minutes. But most of our daycare pups, at least 70%, I would say, utilize that curbside drop off or pickup. It's much more convenient for them, and I also believe it's safer for the pups.
Do you have a limit on how many days dogs can continually stay overnight?
We don't. We base it on the individual dog and the situation. We're not really a long-term boarding facility. So if someone's going to be gone for, let's say, 4 months, they were going overseas, that's really not our thing. We're more so focused on the 3-day weekends, spring break, 4th of July, those types of things.
Okay. And is there going to be some special ventilation when you do this build out?
Absolutely. Yeah. Jim, do you want to talk about the HVAC units?
Sure. Hi, my name is James Riley. 855 Main Street in Bridgeport, Connecticut is our office address. I also live in Trumbull. So as Beatrice mentioned, we do have specialized equipment. The playroom HVAC system is what's called a direct outside air system. And it allows for, unlike human habitable space, it allows for 100% exchange of air. So we bring in 100% fresh air and we exhaust that same air at the same rate. The human areas of the building have traditional HVAC. We also have a system called Synexus within our ductwork. That's a combination of UV light and dry hydrogen peroxide that treats the air. Which helps control odors. It also kills airborne pathogens, including COVID-19. Yeah, we're very focused on keeping as Kayla mentioned, the air inside the playrooms feels like outside air. It's obviously, it's tempered in the winter, but conditioned in the summer. But that's a vital part of kind of the specialty HVAC system we put in.
Doggy daycare has come a long way.
It really has.
Yeah.
I expect a lot of people in Shelton are looking forward to having someplace in Shelton for this. So
I would agree.
So many people really don't want their dogs to be alone all day when they're working. And I totally endorse what you were saying about the overnight boarding being integral to the daycare for most dog parents. But I think when I have used that kind of service, there was always someone in the building overnight. So, I think it'll be up to people to decide how comfortable they are with just kind of this monitoring situation versus having staff present.
Absolutely. And we found that with our pet parents, we have been able to win over their trust and they understand how we monitor the locations. I board my own dogs within our facilities. I would not open or operate a facility that is not one that I would leave my own dog at. But I feel very confident that it is the best situation for them. And we also feel like that is the best way for them to get a restful night's sleep without having the distraction of someone there. Because as someone is moving about the facility, the dogs are awake, they start barking, no one gets a restful night's sleep. Very similar to when you leave your pup maybe to go to a store during the day or go to work during the day. It's very similar, but it does allow them to get a very restful night's sleep.
Okay. All right. Final call for any comments, questions, or concerns for the applicant. Okay. So the floor is open for a motion for the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay. There's a
I'll
motion
second it.
to close public hearing from Commissioner Matos and seconded by Commissioner Kelly. So on the motion to close, made by Commissioner Amato, seconded by Commissioner Kelly, I'll do a roll call. Commissioner Amato,
Aye.
Commissioner Lascos,
Aye.
Commissioner Usel,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
and Commissioner Parkins,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you very much. So this item would be on a upcoming agenda item for discussion and a vote. Okay, so next agenda item just calls for the January 11th, 2022 regular meeting minutes being on the website. I'm not sure if they're uploaded yet, but they will be for sure for adequate review time before approval. And seeing that there's no other item on the agenda for.
Oh, and then just a quick note, they were not up on the website, and it indicates that it's the January 11th, 2021 meeting minutes. Should be 2022.
Yeah, I just saw that on the agenda when I was
Good
looking at it again. So, yeah, we're in that time frame and changing your focus on what year.
But they have not been put up yet either.
They haven't.
No, they haven't. You're right.
No. So, all right, well, seeing that there's no other agenda item, I'll declare this meeting is adjourned as of 8:18 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.